Mike, I don't think we have any public comments submitted today, do we?
No, sir, we did not.
Okay, I didn't receive any either. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from our previous meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Bradley, a second.
Second.
Ms. Salter, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, they're approved unanimously. We're going to move into a presentation by Mr. Whitaker, Kinley Horn. His presentation today is going to be about recoverable costs. I hope everybody received the email from April with the information that's associated he's going to talk to us about. Did anybody not get that? Okay, great. Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you.
And Jeff, want to make sure we are recording, correct?
We are recording. Can everyone see the presentation now?
Yes.
Yes.
So we're going to go over a little bit just prior meetings to make sure we're going to try to tie all the arrows together that we've kind of gone through, kind of make sure we have to do a brief review of service units. Service units becomes important in the recoverable cost, and we're going to go over the recoverable cost calculations. These are the meetings we've had. We've been through a lot together. The meetings I wanted to really point out on here was May 1st. We discussed a lot of impact fee questions on May 1st, but we also showed you a preview of the recoverable costs. You'll see some of those exact same slides from May 1st in here. So I'll point to those slides like, hey, this is the same slide you saw from May 1st. So just remember, you're going to get what you saw on May 1st with a lot more detail today. So we've had some questions that, well, let's make sure we understand all the details. May 1st was the high level. This is going to get into some of the details. Just a reminder about the May 28th public hearing. The results, that we have currently, we're using the assumptions that are currently approved and all the numbers you see. The public hearing on May 28th is going to be on service areas, land use assumptions, and the projects. May 28th does not approve the implementation of an impact fee, and comments could affect everything we show you from here on out. So as we are getting comments, things are addressing. I know we sent you a draft document that outlines everything. There's slight tweaks here and there, but as we receive comments both from city staff on the second part of the report, as well as comments that could come on May 28th, these numbers will all change. That's just a disclaimer. We think these are very, very close, but obviously the decisions that are made on May 28th could affect dollars that are shown in this presentation. So service units, what are they? Remember for roadway, we use a vehicle mile. That means one vehicle to travel 1 mile. And water and wastewater, we use a base water meter of 1 inch. So when we start talking about service units, et cetera, we're talking about vehicle miles and the size of a water meter. This is the chart that a few of you said really speaks home to you. If you look at the blue, the green, and the gray, that's what we've talked about a lot lately. We've talked about total cost. That is the total cost of the roadway capacity plan. That's the total cost of the water capacity plan and wastewater capacity plans. So previously, if you've seen this slide before, we had the land use and populations per checked. It was green, it was checked. We had the develop the 10-year capacity plans, that was checked. Now we're moving on to the next bullet, which says remove costs associated with the existing demand and growth at the 10 years. So really today's presentation is all about that green band. We've talked previously about the blue, green, and gray. Now we're focused on the green. We're focused on, if you will, the numerator to the equation with some exceptions, and that exceptions is the finance credit calculation. But this is the numerator we're talking about. In order to do that, I'm going to take a step back. The report that's been published online had an important piece about the net capacity supplied. And you'll notice when we go through here, we go in a lot more detail on the roadway because, let me rephrase that, there's a lot more tables on the roadway because we're using the philosophy of the universal projects. So we have to actually go through a few more calculations. While the water and wastewater is project specific, you'll see all the water and wastewater is on one table because it's very project specific. While on the roadway, we're looking at service area specific. So there's a few more calculations we do on the roadway side than we do on the water and wastewater side. And you'll see that entirety in the presentation today. So this table that you see in front of you is in the current report that's online that is being reviewed on. This is the one table that you will see that's in the report that council is going to be looking at on May 28th. But it was important to take a step back so you can see where these numbers came from. I'm going to use service area A as the example, and I'll also highlight E a little bit just because we've talked about A and E through the whole time. The calculation on every service area is the same. So service area A, we added roadways to service area A. Those roadways provide trips, traffic. They have amount of traffic that can go through those roadways. We call that the supply of vehicle miles. Service area A, if you add up all the supply that we're given in the service area A, that adds up to 104,360 vehicle miles. We recognize that there are current traffic out on those roadways, so we have to actually capture that current existing traffic. That current existing traffic in service area A is 12,209. We also recognize that there are some roads that are over capacity and those vehicles might switch. Lubbock is actually blessed that you have very good level of service throughout the city. I mean, you have roads that, generally speaking, you're not getting the same delay that you get in the Metroplex. So your existing deficiencies are not very high. What I'll point out on this thing is the area where you have the most existing deficiencies we calculated is in service area G. And service area G is towards the urban core. That's towards the downtown area. So you can imagine the closer you get to downtown, the more congested it gets. And the farther away from downtown, the less congested it might get. There's some still spots of congestion, but not as much. Why is this important? From the very beginning of the project, we take the 104,000, we subtract the 12,209, we subtract the 714 to get to 91,437. So at the very beginning, we automatically take out, in this case, it's 12.38% of the roadways off. We say that out of the capacity that we're adding, 12.38% of that's already being utilized. So that is kind of the credit, if you will, not the credit, the existing percentage of existing roadway. We do that for every service area. As you can see in service area G, most of the capacity we're adding is almost existing needs. We don't have much recovery on existing needs. It's 90%. But for service area A, that 12.38% is, if you want to do the formula, it's 1 minus 91,437 divided by 104,360. That's how you get the 12.38%. I'm going to take a pause on every slide to see if any clarifications on each slide is needed from the committee. Feel free to ask questions. This slide, like I said, the goal of this slide really is to calculate that percentage in red that you see. And I was just outlining how we calculated that percentage in red. Hearing none, I'm going to move on. These are numbers that you've seen previously. The total roadway cost, that is out there. You'll see, and I said I was going to walk through service area A and E. Service area A, the 147,884,713. That is that total cost. That's what we've been talking about a lot, the total cost. And that number is the same as you see in front of you. If you look at E, it's almost the exact same thing. There, as I said, comments are changing. We decided on existing projects not to round. So we were rounding to the nearest 1,000. We are not rounding. So it's just a rounding. There's no change to it. It's just a rounding thing. So you'll see a number that's slightly different. That was a comment we received as through the review process. So the 147 million, we multiply that by 12.38%. So there's an existing need of $18.312 million. And we do that for every service area. And then we subtract out that existing need from the cost supplied. So the first step we do is we take out the existing demand. That's really what this step is we're taking the net amount of vehicles added, divided by the net amount of vehicles supplied, multiplied by the total roadway cost to get to this net capacity supplied. And oftentimes we say, what is the dollar of existing roadway needs? It is this number right here that you see in front of you, the $18,312,707 in service area A. So the most we start out with is $129,572,006. That is new capacity added. That's the amount of new capacity added to the system. I'll take a pause there before I move on to the next slide. If there are any questions, let me know. Then I'm going to take quite of a step back because, yes.
You said there were some differences based on rounding versus not rounding. So for example, service area B on what April sent us as a draft on this table 20, the total roadway cost was 55 million and it's now 60.5.
Right. So service area B is the one, there was one, as I said, we're going through comment review. There was one error in service area B that's been corrected.
That there was an error in what was sent to us, this draft.
Yeah, that is a draft. Yes. This, what you see in front of you is 100% accurate.
Thank you.
And we will send, I'll send a revised PDF of what was sent to you on Tuesday for this group. And it's going to match what's in these slides. But as you can see, it was just a few comments we received from staff to make sure that we're consistent on here and rounding. And area B is the one that you see a little bit of difference because there was one thing that changed on that. But like I said, through May 28th, these results are all preliminary. We're entertaining comments from, council, CIC, and you. And so these will still be changing, as we revolve, but these are pretty close. But we're walking, the formula won't change. What's important about this is we're walking through the formula, and so that you understand and have a good understanding of how we come to the recoverable cost. And like I said, everything that's being mentioned in this slide is not what's on the presentation for May 28th. This is going to come in the report after that date. So once the presentation on May 28th is completed, and if it moves forward in whatever form or fashion desired, we will finalize these numbers and be able to give it back to you. But you will have, you'll at least have the background, the knowledge of how it was calculated with your recommendation right now. All these are with your recommendations that are being presented right now. So I'm going to go to the transportation demand factor. And this is a question, I think, Andy, you brought this up a few times of how these are calculated. So we project demand. So this is the demand side. And we've talked a lot about single family. I think we simply use the 3 factor right now. It's 2.97. So this is a reminder that we project demand based on different usages. So single family is 0.99 times 3 gives you the 2.97. The multifamily, which this is like apartments, gives you the 0.44 times 3 to get you the 1.32. These are your conversion factors. Basic, service, and retail, these are the broad categories that we talked a lot about. Basic is this is your light industrial. Service, this is your general office. And retail, this is your typical shopping center. So these are the assumptions we use to generate the projected demand. This strategy, this way we project demand, is the same strategy that is used by your metropolitan planning organization to do the travel demand model. So if you will, the same projection methodology that we're using to project demand on the city of Lubbock's infrastructure is the same methodology we'd use to project demand and for the transportation plan that the city has. So we're consistent in that methodology.
Hey, Jeff, this is Jonathan. When you look at that mathematical calculation and you look at item T, trip rate, where does that data come from? What assumptions are behind each one of those factors?
So the trip rate, and I'll walk you through each of these if you'd like to know. The trip rate comes from the 10th edition of the ITE trip generation manual. It's a national standard. There's a lot of land uses, and we pull that straight from the trip generation manual and peak hour trips. The pass by very similar. You can imagine, and I didn't explain this on this slide, but I will now. It's if you're going from home to work and you stop at the grocery store, that's why you see retail has a 34% pass by on average. 1 out of every 3 trips that are going to the grocery store or to the supermarket or to whatever retail establishment is just going somewhere else. They happen to stop by there. And these are all based on the same thing. The T and the PB are based on ITE, which is the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and it's based on statistical data that they've gathered over the years. And it's continuously being updated. That's why we're on the 10th edition. And the 10th edition came out, I believe, about last year. So it's the latest and greatest.
And this is just curiosity, Jeff, the data set that goes into that manual, where's that data set come from?
It comes from a wide variety of sources. Every land use has a different source, and they document where those come from. One thing that we do offer up, and that's currently codified in the ordinance, is this is how you calculate the TDF. This is how you calculate the transportation demand factor. This is what the study assumptions are based on. But if you feel like you have a unique land use, you could go through the ITE process and calculate your own trip demand factor. We do allow that in an ordinance. There is a process by IT that allows you to calculate your own trip factor. Typically, I will be honest, typically with you, is that in Texas, when we've done studies, most time when a developer or someone says, hey, I have a special single family unit, and they do the calculation, it tends to be the same, relatively the same or more, because I think people in Texas tend to drive a little bit more than some of the areas. So we rely on national standards, and your modeling does too. I'm kind of going back to there. When we do transportation planning, we typically rely on the same tables. So we're taking the same tables that your thoroughfare plan was built on and utilizing in the impact fee. But there is an option, as in everything. If you don't feel like you fit in one of these categories very well, or you feel like you need to recalculate this, this is the formula that you would use, and you could potentially petition to recalculate it yourself if you choose. Very difficult to do, and I would say usually those are only recalculated for the prime example of when you would do that is the Buddy Holly example that we talked about before. It's a very unique land use that you would have to actually think about and go through, and I kind of did that when I was walking through it. So those are the one-offs. I think I'm going to use the city of Fort Worth because it's the current largest city that I've worked with. It's the largest city in Texas that has impact fees at this point for roadway. And I think I've probably done 3 or 4 calculations over 10 years of specific TDFs. So it's very uncommon. So this is a big table with a lot of numbers. And for my accountant friends, like who are used to looking at tables, this may geek it out, but this is the projection. What I'm doing here is calculating the denominator of the equation, if you will, but it also plays into the numerator. So as you recall, the land use assumptions were broken into service area. We've seen them a lot of times citywide. So this is a table, and it's shown by service area in the report. So in service area A, we showed 3985 single family units, 684 multifamily units. Well, if you take 3985 and you multiply it by the travel demand factor, 2.97, and you add 684, multiply that by 1.32, you'll get 12,738. That's the total vehicle miles of residential development. A similar calculation would occur in non-residential. Remember, a non-residential is per 1,000 square feet. That's one thing to remember. So it would be 4 times 3.87 plus 199 times 3.45 plus 1,689 times 7.34 to get you 13,420. This is exactly how we calculate the growth projection. So you've seen these numbers before, and I think you've seen a similar table of this before, but not the full detail. But to get the service area A, the 10-year growth projections to 26,158 vehicle miles, it is basically taking the growth projections for all 4 categories, multiplying by those travel demand factors, and adding them up. So this is going to do 2 things, and you'll see one later, but this is going to ultimately serve as a denominator. This is the denominator of the equation, but it does play into the fact of the numerator in the roadway because of the way we do the universal project. So there's a lot of numbers on this thing, on this table, but the formula is the same for every service area. And what's really important now, the result out of this table is what's in red. That's what's really important. And the sole reason I went through the TDF factors, I wanted to make sure you understand how we were pulling the units and multiplied together to get to the total vehicle miles. So this slide's probably the slide that is most important. And it takes all the other slides that we've just talked about and been educated on and combines them kind of one. It's not the finished product, but this is probably a really important slide. If you recall, we took that cost of net capacity supplied, which if you recall in service area A, the original total cost was $147 million. We've already taken out the existing to get to the $129 million. So this is that we pulled this number in from a previous table. I just showed you how we came up with the growth projections we pulled in from a previous table. I showed you how we came up with the net vehicle miles supplied. So what's really important is if you look at service area A, wow, the net vehicle miles supplied is 91,437. We only need 26,158 vehicle miles. Well, we can't justify charging all the amount. So this goes to the universal projects. We spent a lot of time at this at the beginning, but I'm explaining it in even more detail now, is we take 28.6% of the total dollar amount. This $37 million, we started at $147 million. We reduced it to 129 million. Now we reduced it to 37 million. And the way we got the $37 million was the total growth divided by the net amount of vehicles supplied. There's been some comments about, hey, you have some projects on there. Can we pick and choose the projects? And this goes back to the discussion we had of universal projects versus the specific projects. If we went out and if all these assumptions were the same and we went out and picked the $37 million, this percent would change to 100%. And so instead of 26% being available, 100% would be available. This number would depend on the blend of projects. So yeah, if we picked a cheaper project, it might change a little bit. Or if we picked a more expensive project, it might change a little bit because it depends, it's cost per capacity. That's what's key, it's cost per capacity. So really the key takeaway here, to get to the recoverable cost, you take you start with the 147 million, you subtract that existing to get to the 129 million you see. Then you multiply that 129 million by just the percent attributable to growth, and you get the 37 million. Same formula for everything, every other element you see here. The one thing I want to point out here is service area G and H, which I'm just pointing out. Obviously, those show over 100%. We can't go over 100%, so we're just capped at the dollar amount. In theory, there's a lot of growth happening here. So the growth is going to go to existing roadways. We can justify the 100% recoverable costs on those new roadways because it exceeds 100%, but we can't go over 100%. So it just matches the net capacity supplied. But the rest of them are all reduced by the percent you see here. We also added in intersections, and we did intersections a little differently. I would say that this is a conservative approach. Conservative by meaning we're going to recover less dollars than we did previously. If you look at the percentages in some communities, we applied the same percentages to the intersections. However, based on feedback we've received, this is based on percentage growth. So the percentages are slightly different. And the reason that we do that is a lot of times intersections are justified. And this is one of the comments I received. Well, the intersection is justified by the existing volume on the roadway. Well, we're capturing that on here. This literally is only the percent growth in vehicle miles. So every service area has a projection in vehicle miles of how much is out there today. This is the growth. So for intersections, we're counting a very small amount of intersections, but this allows us to recover some dollars on the intersections. But when you look at the total cost in the roadways versus the intersections, it's very minimal compared to the other one. But it's a very similar methodology. It's still growth in vehicle miles. In this case, we're doing holistic vehicle projections as opposed to roadway projections, but it's the same similar calculation. But I just wanted to emphasize that we used in some cities, we added on to this percentage. In Lubbock, we chose to use a population-based percentage, a vehicle mile-based percentage on existing population, which does result in a little bit lower recoverable rate because we wanted to be a little bit conservative given the questions about intersections that we have received. So the formula to get recoverable costs, we take the roadway, we add the intersections, and that's the recoverable cost. Let me pause on that a little bit because I went through it fast, but we walked through pretty heavily detailed the cost of roadway capacity added. We showed you the slide on intersections were added. That's the 10-year recoverable cost. And these numbers should look really familiar to you. As I mentioned, we walked through very high level on May 1st. And this is the exact slide for May 1st. I just copied it over here. I didn't change anything. I did put the little draft that results could change, but this is the exact slide we showed on May 1st. If you recall, the total estimated cost before financing, this is intersections and roadways, the estimated existing cost, the beyond the 10-year window, and the estimated recoverable cost. These are the same numbers that you should see here. And just remember, on the left is included in the LUA capacity plan report. On the right, it's not. You haven't seen these before in a report. You do have the short draft that was sent to you on Tuesday that we will revise and resend based on these numbers. Very similar. Most of it's just using exact numbers, but this is the same slide from May 1st. Reminder, we went through that cost breakdown where we started with the total cost, we removed the existing demand, we remove what's outside the 10-year window to get to the estimated recoverable cost. But by the way, we have to account for the double dip by state law. And according to Lubbock, we're going to cut it in half. So recall that we're going to cut this number in half. And with that, I know Andrew's on the line. I figured I would turn it over to him and give a little breakup. But before I turn it over to him, if there's any other questions on roadway and this calculation, we are going to show the fee calculation at the end once we go over water and wastewater. So you'll just remember that we stopped at the recoverable cost right here. And remember, there's still some more steps to get to the actual calculation. But this is actually how we calculate the recoverable cost before we cut it in half by state law. So with that, I'm going to see if there are any questions on the details that we went through. And if not, I'll turn it over to Andrew, and he'll give you a very similar breakdown on the water and wastewater. A little different since I'm sharing my screen, so he's going to have to, talk off my screen. But any questions on the roadway?
As I read through that draft, Jeff, there's just a few questions that you kind of sped through, and I didn't stop you, but maximum trip length, you were going through it with Jonathan, and you stopped on the factor above maximum trip length. If you'll go back to that slide. Yeah,
Yep.
L max there. So it's the maximum trip length was limited to 6 miles, which I think is the way we set up our service areas. There's 8 service areas in Lubbock, and they're all about 6 miles. Is that correct? And then that gets cut in half for everything but the basic, which is mentioned as industrial. I just was curious why industrial got treated different on the maximum trip length on that.
Industrial tends to be regional trips. So in a lot of cities we typically use that the trip length on industrial, if you do trip length calculations, is more like 17 miles in many cases, 12 miles. It depends on the region you're in. I need to pull up the data for Lubbock in specific, but it is greater than 6 miles. So we felt justified to use the maximum service area for industrial land uses. Very few industrial land uses are going short trip lengths.
Jeff, this is Kelly.
Yes.
If I might ask a point of clarification, with that prior slide of the total recoverable costs, isn't it true that it's at the option of council to participate up to 50%, but they may choose to do less? Isn't that correct?
Yes, absolutely. So you're referring to this slide, the total recoverable cost. I was going to cover that in the maximum fee. This isn't even going to be. I call this the total recoverable cost because that's kind of what we're talking about right now. But when we get later, we have to cut that in half, and then council can participate up to that amount.
Right.
That's correct, Kelly.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to go back to that slide did I clarify your question, Andy? Basic has the longest trip lengths of anything, and then the other ones, and not every, so for the generalized assumptions, these are the generalized assumptions, which are pretty accurate. I think if you think about your home to work trip, we capped it at the 3 miles. A lot of folks probably in Lubbock are traveling more than 3 miles from home to work. So we are actually, I think, taking a conservative estimate on that and capping it by the radius of the service area, which is a common practice.
And so, Jeff, it's safe to assume that the maximum number that L max could be is 6?
Yes, the maximum number that could be is 6. That's correct. And we cut it in half for the other land uses because we were being conservative. Now, if you look at the full table that we provided you, which breaks this down into a little bit more granular detail, there are many land uses that are less than 3 miles, like a gas station or a coffee shop, because we get more granular. This is the 5 general categories, but the granular land use assumptions are, some of them have smaller trip lengths than what you see on here. Good question, Andy. Any other questions before I turn it over to Andrew? All right, Andrew, I'll let you walk through this.
Thanks, Jeff. Kind of what Jeff was saying is that The water and the wastewater are a little bit more straightforward than the roadway, in the sense that we only have one service area, so we're not looking at all the different service areas that the roadway has, and everything's based off of your water meter size when looking at the respective impact fees. And the reason why it's done on meter size is kind of the philosophy of, if I'm requesting a 1-inch meter, I can draw so much water off the distribution system. If I request a 2-inch meter, I can impact the system more. So that's where you start seeing the differences in fees. Now, when we talk about total recoverable costs, each project that you see there, so for the wastewater, we have our 22 proposed impact fee eligible projects. And what we do is for both the water and the wastewater, in the master plans, we had a hydraulic model that was developed and calibrated and utilized to help kind of make decisions from a master planning standpoint. And what we've done for the impact fee for our capacity plans is we've actually built additional modeling scenarios. We have a 2020 scenario to kind of look at our base year conditions. And then we have a 10-year 2030 scenario that incorporates the growth that we projected from the land use assumption. So what you can see there is for each project, we have different percent utilization. We have a 2020 utilization, a 2030, and then what's that growth? What's that 10-year impact? And so you can see on this list here for a lot of these projects, you have 0% utilization in 2020. And the reason why you have 0% is because it's a project that does not exist yet. There is no utilization or impact to the system. And then you look out 10 years, you apply the amount of growth to the area, and what you see there is I'm looking at project number 1. It's a 36-inch sewer line, so it's not in right now, so it has a 0% utilization for 2020. But in 10 years, 35% of that capacity has been utilized due to growth. And the way that's calculated is the hydraulic model. It tells you what the flow is in that pipe, and what its capacity is based on the diameter of the pipe as well as the slope for wastewater projects. So for example, if that project has a 10 MGD capacity, million gallons per day capacity, as far as how much flow can travel through it, what we're saying is we're using 3.5 MGD or 35%. Those aren't the exact numbers, but I'm just trying to explain how those numbers are calculated. So we use the information from the hydraulic model to tell us what our utilization is. If you look at a project, say for instance, project 2, that is a downtown sewer line. While you see that 55% in 2020, you see that has an existing utilization. And why that is because there's an existing line there right now that has so much flow going through it. Now, the plan is to upsize that line to handle new growth and capacity in the downtown area. So this new project it'll have a greater capacity and it'll address growth. So you have a line that you would say that in 2020 it's 55% utilized. The capacity is about half full, and then in 10 years' time, when we add all our growth, we're moving up to 85%. So a total 10-year utilization increase of 30%. And the total cost, those are the dollars that we've seen for quite a few meetings and presentations. They're incorporated in the kind of first report that will be discussed at the May 28th public hearing. And then the next 3 columns, those are looking at the different amounts as related to the percent utilization, and it kind of ties back to the kind of the blue, green, gray box that Jeff was showing earlier. So we have dollars that are allocated to existing development, We also have dollars that are related to the beyond 10-year development. And then that kind of 10-year window, that's the middle column. So what you can do is you can take your 2020 utilization, multiply by the total cost, that tells you your dollars in terms of current development. You have the 10-year, 2020 to 2030 development. That number is that 10-year utilization multiplied by the total cost, and then the remainder is the beyond 10-year cost. So what we're focused on for the total recoverable cost is that 10-year 2020 to 2030 column. That's the $31,074,000. Those are the total recoverable costs, the maximum amount that can be recovered. And when we get to it here at the end, that's the dollar amount that gets cut in half per state law that Jeff was mentioning earlier. Does anybody have any questions about how the process is developed or calculated?
I don't have any questions on that. I think we've asked this question before, but I've forgotten. There's 22 projects. Are these in any particular order as to which one would be done first?
They're not in a hard and fast order, no. You don't have to, say for instance, you don't have to construct projects 1 through 12 to do number 13. It's just an ID system.
Yeah, but this,
I'll say I do know like that project 1 is something that's the city's currently designing and constructing. So I know that one's going to come online sooner. But as far as these other ones, there is no separate.
I wonder if we were asked to prioritize, if looking at the 2020 percentages at project 4, 65% of that project will be for utilization on existing deficiencies on an existing system. That would seem to be a way to prioritize it, is which ones have the biggest percentage on existing deficiencies. And when I see that 65% and it's number 4, it obviously shows me that it wasn't put in order because of that.
Right. The order, yeah, the order is not prioritized. We can certainly reorder it.
I think if I could chime in there too. I mean, Andy, we're always doing that and trying to look at where the development needs are, where we're pushing and pulling things, how it fits in the budget. Because you pointed out number 4, but that's a $9.5 million project versus some of them that may be a little cheaper. And so trying to fit all of those in to existing budget, impact fees aside, we're always doing that with our budget and trying to prioritize projects as addressing the needs of development and how that plays in. So, that's the one. Number 22 could wind up going up to number 1 if we see a whole bunch of growth out in that area all of a sudden, and we weren't expecting it until 2029 or 2030. And then all of a sudden you get some land on the cheap and you want to go build that right now, then we try to respond to that. So that gives us the flexibility to switch in between all of these projects as needed.
But if we go find some land and we need sewer and water and it's not one of these 22 projects, we can't use impact fees on it for the next 10 years. Is that correct?
Not next 10 years, but you would have to amend or update your capacity plan in order to utilize impact fee dollars.
And how often can we look at amending or revising this list?
Well, at a minimum, it has to be every 5 years. It can be done more frequent.
I know these were conversations that we've already had, but it's just, everything makes a little more sense nowadays after we've been through months of this.
Sure. Jeff, can you go to the next slide? So this is the water impact fee total recoverable cost slide. The same number of projects, that was a coincidence, that wasn't by design. But it's also the same process and the same methodology where we're using a hydraulic model to look at flows in pipes and facilities in 2020, and then look 10 years out to determine what is our increase in project utilization over that time. I do want to mention that we have a series of elevated storage tanks kind of on the top. How we look at utilization of elevated storage tanks and pump stations. On the tank specifically, we allocate so many different customers, which turns into a demand, which looks at how much of that volume in the tank is being utilized. So the elevated towers that are there in currently right now, they're going to be phased out as part of this new tank program. And so a lot of these new tanks capacity is going to go towards serving existing customers, as well as having a component for growth in the 10-year window. On the pump stations, we have, you look at Project 3 is pretty simple because that pump station is not in place now. But then we're using 50% of its pumping capacity in the 10-year time window. Project 17 is a expansion of pump station 15, which is up just north of the airport, based on some projected non-residential growth. We're taking some of that capacity, preserving it for our existing customers, and then increasing it for the new growth. Of the $97 million plus for the total cost, we're looking at that total recoverable cost 10-year window of $33,143,000. Here again, that number will be cut in half for the state law. But that, just if you just looking at you go back real quick, Jeff, sorry. Looking at those last three columns, you can see how the dollars break down versus, what number, what dollars are being allocated for our existing customers, what's allocated for our 10-year growth window, and then what do we have capacity to serve beyond 10-year window. So if there's any other questions related to water and wastewater, I'd be happy to entertain that.
I've got another comment. On the last table, I found one discrepancy, and on this one, I've got three on the total cost, that middle column, on what's online on the report versus what's shown here. The biggest one is item 15 on this water chart. On the online report, it was listed at 404,000, and here it's 2.9 million.
Yeah, those were typos in our initial report. So these are the correct values. They've been double checked.
So will we make that comment because on May 28th, this council will review the report that I think we see online. Will that be a comment added to their review?
Yes, we can make that, let them know. I can make a note of which ones were modified from the original.
Add a slide to the few tweaks. As the draft says, is what we're adopting them is really the list of projects, and we can make a list if anything technically changes as we go through the technical part of the project, which is where we're diving into right now. If something has tweaked, our intent is that the projects won't tweak and nothing will change. The only thing we tweak is through the final report to make sure that everything lines up, that all the numbers are consistent with each other. But we can document anything that we clearly on a slide, and there's a few minor things we can document that.
Andrew, this is Jonathan. Can you remind us your total cost figures there? Is that based upon today's cost estimates? Is there any future factor in that calculation?
No, those costs, those are 2020 costs, and that's how we projected the estimated total cost for each project.
And so based on that, Andrew, since I'm looking at cost based on 2020 dollars for the 10-year plan and beyond 2030, is it safe to say that those numbers are low?
Well, the reason why they have kept it $20 is because we don't, I can't assign exactly a year to each project to know when it will get built. Kind of what Mike was saying, some of these projects can really be moved up and down in terms of when they get built. It's just kind of based on need at the time. And so when, I'll say, if this update is done in a 5-year time frame, the cost will be reevaluated and looked at to just kind of make sure that we're being as current as we can.
Andrew, I'd like to clarify the difference between a typographical error and a correction. So as to item 15 that Andy asked about, the difference is about $2.5 million. And you said that's a typographical error. Do you mean literally it's a typographical error, or there's some other correction that's involved to increase that number by that much?
No, it was a typographical. It was the wrong cell reference when we were doing our calculations in Excel.
Got it.
And I think to speak to Jonathan's question a little bit too, Jonathan asking if these numbers are low or not. I mean, none of us know what our crystal ball is, even though Katie's got hers with her. We've seen construction costs start to increase. We were blessed to have low construction costs for quite a while, but we're starting to see our costs creep up. And so, we make the best guess for estimates that we can. And that's why you kind of go back and reevaluate. If we see a 50% increase in the construction market, then all these are going to be drastically low, and we'll have to revise the plan at that time. Obviously, that's an extreme, but as you try to make estimates, cost estimates based on what's going to happen over the next 10 years, that's just difficult to do. And so we don't put those escalation factors in there by projecting what inflation is going to be, just because we don't know what year the budgets are actually going to fall in.
Mike, let's talk about those projections for just a second. Where do you get your beginning number? Is that off the last project that was done, your knowledge of current market conditions? Where do you get that beginning number?
And I'll answer a little bit, but I'll let Jeff and Andrew speak to that too. But typically we start with what we've seen actual bid numbers come in, and that's where our starting place is. A lot of times we'll use TxDOT numbers because they've got kind of a larger pool to choose from as far as what unit costs are. And we kind of base there and just try to roll everything in, because when we're doing estimates, we haven't done any preliminary design. We just say, here's a segment, we need a water line from here to here. We haven't looked at right-of-way capabilities, utility conflicts, anything else that might be there. And so we're going to have a little bit of an extra factor for the what if. No, we don't want to be crazy factor. It needs to be realistic. And so we feel like we've done that. And Jeff and Andrew have both done their cost estimates based on a lot of the factors. I'll let them chime in if they need to add something to that.
I would just chime in that, we obviously as a firm do roadway projects for the city of Lubbock, and we would use a very similar planning level cost estimate on a roadway project versus an impact fee project. There's really no difference. The only difference is, I will say, and if you read our cost estimate sheets in the appendix, there's a little disclaimer on there that says we wouldn't use these to bond debt. And why is that disclaimer on there? Is because every city, there are some non-impact fee eligible items that we do not include in the cost estimate that some cities will include in bond dollars. So a lot of times when we're actually bonding projects for the city, there's a little bit more that's added to these projects. So it would be if the city asks us to do with the level of information and provide us, what's a cost estimate for road X? This would be our starting point. We would refine that a little bit, but to answer the question, there are some things that some cities, some cities, when they actually go and bond at a project, they have project management staff time in there. We do not include project management staff time in our impact fee study. So there's some elements that are not included in there, but these are based on actual bid prices and based on TxDOT bid prices as well as city bid prices on projects.
Jeff, what kind of contingency factor do you typically include, and Mike also, in those estimates?
If I'm going to do an estimate at this stage, I would do a 20 to 25% contingency for budgetary purposes. And I think we've used significantly less than that for these cost estimates.
Okay.
Yeah, we used a 10% contingency for the roadway.
Okay.
But usually at this level, we would use a little bit higher, but we kept it at a 10% contingency for this purposes.
Okay, thank you.
And is that something council might comment on in terms of, no, we should use 20%? Or no, we should use 5%?
Council has the ability to comment on any element. I can say my history of doing it, I rarely have the cost estimates being something that an elected official, usually they rely on engineers and staff and folks to look into, because we feel pretty confident in our cost estimations that if the city was to ask us to do capital improvement programming for them, this is the numbers that we would provide them at this level of engineering. But they have the ability to comment on any element of the project.
Excuse me. Now, my question is, this is just a draft, correct? What you sent us was just a draft. No one's seen it but us at this point? Okay, so all of this can change on the 28th, the council can say, I want the numbers to be the standard. It's up to them to decide what they want, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
This part of it will not be reviewed on the 28th, correct?
No, this part won't be, but there are some, I mean, like, as I said, on the 28th, the report on the 28th ultimately rolls into the ultimate report. So what we're asking them on the 28th to do is to give us a resolution that says our service areas are good, our land use assumptions our growth projections are valid, and the list of projects is good. We've also provided a glimpse of the cost projections. So if they have something that we can incorporate comments from that meeting, and I think we talked about this last time, they could accept the report as is. They can accept the report with CIC comments. They can accept the report with these comments. There's various options that they can do on the 28th. We don't know until the public hearing's held of what they can do. But the way I've described it is, we've built the first 4 chapters, and then we're going to build, I think it's 4. We're going to build the next few chapters afterwards. So, but really the feedback is service areas, growth projections, and list of projects is really what we're looking for from council.
And I think that's important to know. It's not the cost of the projects per se, it's just the list of the projects. We've provided the costs, and so they're there, but that's just, everybody needs to be aware of that as well.
Because the costing really comes down to this slide that I'm showing you, the same one for water and wastewater on your screen now. But there's a lot of factors that are going to determine to getting from the total cost to the recoverable cost. So we kind of gave them the magnitude right now, but we were walking through all that. But, they'll have this costing and technical elements in the final adoption, the final report as well, laid out the way that you see it now with all the details. Great questions. So the slide that's in front of you is the same one that you saw on May 1st, that kind of walks through in the summarized version of the details that Andrew just went to. It summarizes that last row, if you will, just to kind of give you, what is included, what's currently in the report is the total cost and the demand group, and then what's included in the final report. And remember, this will be cut in half. And I was going to show this slide. Kelly mentioned this already. Is remember, that's not the true recoverable cost yet. I mean, that is the recoverable cost that we turn into there, but then we do the calculation, and within the calculation of the recoverable cost, we have a financing component. We've been showing you the percent we're doing right now. That's the one thing that we're still working through the city on, making sure that we're comfortable with the financing. Some of that's going to depend on the input we get from council of how we do that. Then we have the percent recoverable, 50%. So then you get the total recoverable plus financing of credit. This just shows service area A. and then it shows the water and wastewater. So to Kelly's comment, is this 22 million for service area A, 18 million for water, and 20 million for wastewater? That is the maximum potential fee that they could charge up to. They could charge anything from 0 to collecting a revenue projection of $22,986,000. So that's the decision they'll have to make. Do we do 0? Do we do up to 22 million? And then you've seen these before, the service unit numbers that wear out. Ours are in vehicle miles, water and wastewater in the different units. They're in the meter size. And then you've seen these numbers before to get to the maximum accessible fee. These are the same slides we've shown before, but wanted to have this in here just to remind you that, you know, the recoverable cost is just the first line of the fee calculation. We multiply it by financing, we cut that in half. And then after that, after that cut in half, this is where the policy decision that this body will be discussing and that council will be discussing comes into play. At this point, if you will, in reality, we're facilitating discussion for you guys, but at this point, this is where Andrew and I's job is done, except for comments that we receive from this group, council, etc. But this is the calculation. So we'll have another discussion on this, but I didn't want to leave the discussion of recoverable costs thinking everyone it's 37 million. Well, it's not really 37 million. It's going to be somewhere around 22 million. But as we said, these are still draft, pending on stuff on the comments to receive through the public hearing. This is a similar slide you've seen before. And with that was our detailed walkthrough. I mean, you pretty much have walked through the next section of the report, the recoverable cost. You haven't gotten the section of the max fee. Those will be a little more detail in that, but this is going to be a very similar table that's in the report once we get this kind of finalized and wrapped up. So you're kind of walking through all the details. There's nothing that we hope that we've not opened the hood up and you've examined. This is kind of opening the hood up and examining everything inside of it right now. So with that, I'll turn the floor over to Thomas, and we'll answer any other questions that y'all have, but that's kind of our presentation for the day.
Thomas, you're muted, sir. We can't hear you.
So sorry. I'll open it up for questions in general. In about 10 minutes, we'll take a 5-minute break. So does anyone have any questions? Jeff, I noticed,
Jeff,
I mean, go ahead, Andy.
that last slide where it was, I think we all have gotten used to looking at it. Just want to clarify, that was service area A, and you showed a max. I want to see the max fees for where we've ended up today. Sorry. Okay, so 2608 for roadway, 562 for sewer, and 576 for water per single family. Is that correct? And that total is 3,746. Is that 3,746 the same number that a couple months ago was 5,700 or so?
Without knowing the exact numbers, but my short answer is yes. Like, the biggest change to that being the removal of the existing projects for water and wastewater, and then we've kind of refined the roadway a little bit more. I think the difference in that number you showed before, and we've had a lot of meetings, but I think we removed the right of way and then removed existing projects. So that's the big difference from the 5,000 number to the number you see today. Let me know if you want me to stop sharing screens, or if when you want to take over. I want to make sure I'm giving you the time y'all need.
If you're waiting on
So
me, I'm
Jeff, if
good.
I understood you correctly, that your total recoverable cost with financing with credit applied, that number is still evolving because you're still in discussions with the city about financing. Did I get that right?
Yes, we're still, for the whole second half of the report, which is not going to council to May 28th, we're still in the review process with the city, so, which includes the financing, yes. So these numbers are still preliminary. I think that they were for the purposes of having the discussion. I think that they're pretty, I mean, we wouldn't show them to you if you didn't think they were pretty close to being accurate, but they're still, obviously, if something happens on May 28th, council gives us a direction, something else, that could impact these numbers as well.
Well, I think
So
also,
will you tell us again what factor you're using for the financing under your assumptions right now?
I think on that slide it shows 21%.
Yes, 21%.
Okay.
So that's the total number. I think it's like 3.69% if you do from the debt purposes, but I have to verify that, and I'm
Gotcha.
getting that up right now. But it comes out to 21.5% over the 10 years in the total recoverable calculations. But it goes down to a regular percentage, like 3.69, I think is the actual number that we use. We pulled the average municipal bond rate at the time of the day when we did this. So that's the number we got to verify with finance department.
I think
And
that
also-
number sounds right.
Also, Jeff, this is assuming that 50% of the projects are cash funded and 50% of them are debt funded. So if that percentage changes, these numbers will fluctuate as well.
That's correct.
That last slide we were just looking at, I don't see that in the draft report. Is that, which actually shows the max fee? Will that be included?
Yeah, so what you got sent was just for purposes of today, not the full report. You just got the next 12 pages. The next section, I believe, is that calculation. So eventually, we wanted to, continue the conversation, get on more technical. So we wanted y'all to really, the feedback we got from this group was to get into the details. So we thought we would send you what was going to be in the report. It gives you text. Hopefully, the discussion during the presentation was trying to relay what that text was. We were debating on whether to put it in slides like we showed you, which is easier to do on Zoom, or just show up the PDF and go through the PDF and discuss it. We thought the slide format was a little bit easier, but eventually, I don't know if it'll be before May 28th, but you will have the whole report at some point.
Okay. I just wasn't seeing that, a total max fee dollar amount in that report. So I was making sure that would be in there to be able to be reviewed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, what y'all been sent, Shane, is just the recoverable cost piece, which we went over today. And so obviously y'all have seen the max fee, but how you come up with that number and all that details is still to be presented to y'all.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to suggest we take a 5-minute break at this time. And so we'll be adjourned at 11:13.
So before everybody's back, Thomas, just FYI, apparently there's going to be a B1 flyover at 11:40 over Covenant.
Covenant main campus?
I believe so. Starts in Amarillo, comes to Lubbock's VA clinic, then to Covenant Medical Center at about 11:40. It'll continue to Odessa, Midland, and Abilene.
We'll see if we can get out in time today. Everybody can enjoy that. Let's see, we're waiting on Andy. There's Katie.
Looks like Jonathan audio is connecting. Can we hear you, Jonathan?
Yeah, can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
I'm having some
we got it.
computer issues today, so I'm sorry. I'm trying to get it fixed here.
Is it that new conversion, Jonathan?
Not yet. I don't know what's going on with our network, so I'm on my iPhone now. So I apologize if I'm a little in and out here. I'm trying to get it fixed up here.
You're good. Is Andy back with us? Okay. So I'll call us back into session. First of all, does anyone have any questions they want to ask either Andrew or Jeff about the presentation today? Okay, hearing none. Mike, our ability to conduct online meetings has been extended to what date at this point?
The governor's extension, as I understand, and Kelly can jump in if I'm incorrect, but I think it's extended it to another 30 days. So I think it stopped May 12th before, and it's been extended for 30 more days beyond that.
Okay. So I want to announce to everyone, particularly those who are observing, we're going to have a public meeting next week on Friday at 10 o'clock. And it is structured so that people have the ability to come and address our committee, and we have the ability to interact with them and Q&A with them, as distinguished from the public comment period at the beginning of our meetings where the public can comment, but we can't really interact with them. This next meeting will be posted as a public meeting, so we will be able to interact with people who want to come and speak to the committee, and we'll be able to ask them questions during that time. So that I expect that will take all of our time at our next meeting. That's what I expect us to accomplish. And then the following week, we'll be back to discussing the details of impact fees and today's presentation and all of the numbers that we're now beginning to get into. But we're starting now to kind of steamroll forward into the meat of our purpose. So I expect we'll have a lot of discussion. Since we don't have any questions about the presentation today, I'm going to open it up in general for discussion. Mike was just saying before everybody got back, there was a flyover over Covenant at 11:40. So I'm going to try to get us out of here at 11:35 today if we can. So we've got about 20 minutes for any questions, not just about the presentation today, but any questions or comments that anyone wants to make. Anyone want to jump in there?
I have a few questions.
Andrew? Andy?
I'm Andrew, that's fine.
Yeah.
Did I hear you right? We'll be meeting as a committee in person at the new City Hall next Friday at 10?
No, that's not correct. The meeting will be a Zoom meeting, just as they have been. I'm sorry I wasn't clear about that, but no, it will not be an in-person meeting.
So the participants that want to, how are the logistics for them to comment, and what are the timelines or deadlines to reserve a spot there?
So when all of those details will be posted with the posting for the meeting, and that has to be 72 hours prior, as always. So everybody needs to refer to that posting when it comes out for those details. But there will be provisions for people to sign up to speak and have a space to speak.
And Thomas, if I may, to interject, if it's like what we were thinking, and this can change, but you know, like right now we've signed up, we require sign up the day before to have a public comment. You know, ideally we could have people do the same thing to sign up. We know they're going to speak. I don't know that it would be a bad thing to have them either raise their hand or do a Q&A thing. To Jeff has the ability to host that and to promote them to panelists to be able to talk in that format. So that's kind of going to be up to Thomas and this group of how y'all want to handle that exactly. I know Jeff has done some different webinar things, and if you get more than 10 people involved, sometimes that gets tricky of trying to promote everybody. So the question and answer piece could be there. Somebody could be reading those questions out and doing the feedback. And so there's several ways that we can kind of tackle that. I know Jeff's got more experience doing that with a larger group participating in the Zoom function, but it seems to work pretty well.
Jeff, do you have any comments you want to make about that?
The easiest way to do it, and I think my suggestion would be, is speakers who want to visually speak to sign up so that we can identify them, be prepared, and go in a certain order. However, once we're done with all the people who signed up, we typically allow people to ask questions through the Q&A button on Zoom, and we'll read the questions and respond to them, but not necessarily have them be able to speak, because it can get a little tricky and unruly. That's typically the format we've been doing, but obviously we could do whatever format you choose.
Well, personally, I would be in favor of exactly what you said. If we can ask people who know they want to speak to sign up beforehand, then just as you said, we organize that part of it. And then when we get through that, we can have more of an open Q&A session. Does anybody else have any thoughts about that?
Is that in the beginning when you're having these people sign up, is that the same public comments that we've been doing, the 3-minute max, and they just get to speak and not ask questions? Is that correct?
No, what we're talking about now is the methodology for handling the public meeting. So we would be asking to sign up to be included on the list to speak during the public meeting. So that would be during the Q&A part of the meeting in lieu of the public comment part.
Okay, so it's not just people signing up to give the 3-minute comments like we've seen up to this point. This is actually a Q&A by the public if they want to participate, correct?
Shane, that's exactly right. So there are two important differences. One, they aren't necessarily limited to the 3 minutes, but the most important distinction is there's the ability to interact with the committee. And so they can speak and then we can ask them questions and interact with them. That's the key difference.
Okay, thank you.
Sir.
One thing that would be helpful is I was looking at the city website on the engineering impact fee page to pull up the report, but also notice the videos, and was going back and reviewing some of those and noticed the last call, about the first half of our call was not there. And a lot of information on there would be pretty important for the public to review and decide if, you know, it may provide some background for those that want to come with questions.
Unfortunately, that's not there. Jeff can throw himself under the bus for a second.
I did not turn on the video on that one until after the presentation was done. So I caught it after it was done. We can absolutely potentially put the presentation online, the PDF of it.
It already is.
It is online? Okay, so, but I mean, as far as the detail in the presentation, it was not recorded.
So yeah, we have the slides that are already online from that meeting, which you're right, Andy, that had some good information, but unfortunately, there's no way to go back and get to re-record that now. So that's I think one of the problems that Jeff had is if you do a single monitor, once you share your screen, it covers everything else up. And so we didn't see that it wasn't recording. And so that's just a technical glitch on our side. And so we apologize for that. There's no way to get that back, but we do have the slides.
One of the huge benefits of doing Zoom is that we're able to record it. And that's amazing. But if you recall, when we meet in person, we don't record the meetings. So that was just an added benefit we had, but we put the presentation online and we recognized it was a hindsight on that. And this one's recorded, so.
Does anyone else have any questions? Comments? All right, well, we'll have plenty of time between now and next week to study up on Jeff's presentation. And we'll plan on 10 o'clock, and it will be posted as a public meeting. And we'll look forward to having some input from the folks that aren't on the committee next week and a good discussion. If no one else has any comments, I'm going to close for today. One more time, anybody? All right, well, I'm going to close our meeting for today and thank y'all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank y'all very
Thank
much.
you.